Hello dear students. In previous class, we studied about the different types of attributes shown by the population. And after that, we studied how there are different types of population models, population growth models. We studied about the exponential growth model and then logistic growth model. Now, today we are going to study the interactions between different populations, how these different populations they interact. These interactions may be of different types. It may be the positive interaction, both the populations when they are interacting with each other, the outcome is positive for both. And there are also interactions where interaction is positive for one type of population but negative for another type of population. And there are interactions where one type of population is benefited but other type is not affected. So you can see this chart. It is there in your book as well. In this chart, we can see different types of interactions. It may be predation, competition, parasitism, commensalism, amensalism, and mutualism. We will study the details of these populations, interactions, and how they affect each other. So let's study it in more detail. Now let us study the population interactions in more detail. The living organisms interact in various ways to form biological communities. These biological communities may show interactions. So these interactions may be either interspecific interaction, where it is the interactions of populations of two different species, whereas in intraspecific interactions, it is the interactions of individuals of the same species. So these interaction, you can see the table. This can be predation, where species A is benefited and species B is harmed. So plus sign means benefited, minus signs means harmed. And in competition, whenever there is competition, both the species interacting are harmed. Third is parasitism, where the parasite species is benefited and the host species is harmed. Then comes commensalism, where one species is benefited but other species is neither harmed nor benefited. So it is shown by 0. Then comes amensalism. In amensalism, one species is harmed whereas other species is neither benefited nor harmed. And finally, mutualism, where both the interacting species are benefited. So let's now study it with more details. The most important and common type of interaction is predation. It is the interspecific interaction in which the predator, which is a strong animal, kills and consumes the prey, which is weak animal. Therefore, one species is benefited and other is harmed. Predation is a way to transfer the energy from lower trophic levels to higher trophic levels. Predator keeps the prey population under control. Otherwise, prey will reach very high population density and it will cause imbalance in the ecosystem. Sometimes predators are used as biological controls for pests in agriculture. For example, the ladybirds are used to control the aphids, whereas dragonflies are used to control the population of mosquitoes. The prey species also have evolved various defense mechanisms to reduce the impact of predation. For example, there is a phenomena of cryptic coloration where certain insect species, frogs, or even reptiles have camouflage with their surrounding. So here you can see the frog has got cryptic coloration and it is totally camouflaged with the surrounding. Similarly, monarch butterfly is a very distasteful to its prey bird. It has a special chemical in its body, and this chemical is produced during its caterpillar stage by feeding on poisonous weeds. Herbivores are the predators for plants. The problem of predation is more severe for plants than animals because plants cannot move. About 25% of the known insects are phytophagous and they feed on plant sap. So, plants have also developed certain morphological and chemical defense mechanisms against herbivores. For example, thorns in bougainvillea and spines in acacia. There are certain chemicals produced by plants which act for their defense. Calotropis produces a highly poisonous glycoside that is a cardiac poison. Similarly, nicotine, caffeine, quinine, opium, etc. are the chemicals produced by the plants against the herbivores. Now we come to the next type of interaction, which is competition. Competition is an interaction among the individuals of the same species, that is intraspecific generally, or it may be between the individuals of the different species, then it is called interspecific. Competition between the individuals of the same species is for same resources that are limited. In some case, resources need not be the limiting for competition to occur. The feeding efficiency of one species may be reduced due to the interfering of the other species. For example, abundant tortoise in Galapagos Island became extinct within a decade after goats were introduced into the island. It was due to the fact that goats had higher and greater browsing efficiency than the tortoise. So, unrelated species also compete for the same resources. For example, flamingos and fish, they both compete for zooplanktons. Then there is a concept of competitive release. A species whose distribution is restricted to a small geographical area because of the presence of a competitively superior species is called competitive release. These species is found to expand its distributional range dramatically when the competing species is experimentally removed. So this is called competitive release. Next comes the concept of Gauss competitive exclusion principle, which states that two closely related species competing for the same resources cannot exist together, and the competitively inferior species will be eliminated by superior. That is the concept of Gauss competitive exclusion principle. Then third concept of competition is resource partitioning. It is the mechanism meant for coexistence of species to face competition. According to this, if two species compete for the same resources, they could avoid the competition by choosing different times for feeding or different foraging patterns. For example, MacArthur showed that five closely related species of warblers, which are birds, living on the same tree were able to coexist and avoid competition by having behavioral differences in their foraging or hunting activities. So they try to avoid competition. So next interaction type of interaction is parasitism. Parasitism is the interspecific interaction where one of the species, which is called parasite, depends on the other species, which is called as host, for food and shelter. Host gets harmed and parasite gets benefited. Parasites are host specific, and parasites and its host tend to co evolve. What is co evolve? Co evolve means that if the host evolves a spatial mechanism to reject or resist the parasite also has to evolve the mechanisms to neutralize them, which is called parasite adaptations. Therefore, parasites try to co evolve, and it may be in the form of loss of sense organs, presence of suckers or hooks, loss of digestive system, high reproductive capacity, all these things. Some parasites have complex life cycles and generally have one or two intermediate hosts. Intermediate hosts act as vectors, which facilitates parasitization of host. Human liver fluke has two intermediate hosts. It may be snail or fish. Likewise, malaria parasite has one intermediate host, that is mosquito, to spread to other host. Then human lice and ticks are called ectoparasites. Copepods and ectoparasites on some marine fish, they are also example of parasite ectoparasitism. Cuscuta is a parasitic plant that grows on trees or shrubs. It has lost its chlorophyll and leaves during its evolution. It gets its nutrition from the host plant by Hostoria. Now we will study about the next type of interaction, which is called commensalism. It is the interspecific interaction in which one species benefits and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. For example, epiphytes. These are the plants like orchids growing on the tree branch. Likewise, barnacles growing on the back of whales. Association between egret, a bird, and grazing cattle. It is also commensalism. Egret always forages close to the cattle where they are grazing because they easily get the insect. The clownfish living along with the sea anemone. The clownfish gets protection from the predator. Likewise, suckerfish on the back of shark. These are very important examples of commensalism. Now let's come to the very interesting type of interaction, which is called mutualism. It is the interspecific interaction in which both the species interact, they get benefits. For example, lichens are relationship between fungus and algae. For example, also there another example is mycorrhiza, which is an association of fungus with roots of higher plants. In this interaction, fungi help to absorb the nutrients from the rocks and plants provide energy yielding carbohydrates to fungi. Likewise, plants depend on insects for pollination, and in return, they give them nectars or pollens to eat. Also, animals help the plants in seed dispersal, and in return, they give fruits to animals as food. Likewise, a fig tree and pollinator species of wasp. Fig species can be pollinated by its partner, wasp only. And finally, the last type of interaction is amensalism. It is an interspecific interaction in which one species is harmed and other is neither benefited nor harmed. For example, penicillium secretes a chemical called penicillin which kills the bacteria. Now, these are few examples. Can you answer it? Can you identify it? For example, cuscuta growing on shoe flower plant. What type of interaction is it? Yes, it is called parasitism. Likewise, mycorrhiza living on the roots of higher plant, it is mutualism. Clownfish living among the tentacles of sea anemone, it is commensalism. Quail laying her eggs in crow's nest, it is a kind of parasitism. It is called brood parasite. They lay the eggs in the crow's nest. Then 5 closely related species of warblers living on the same tree. What type of interaction it is? It is, yes, it is competition with resource partitioning. So with this we complete the chapter. I hope you have understood the various aspects of this chapter. How different organisms, they adapt to their given environment, how their population dynamics is shown, and how these populations are interacting with each other. With this we complete this chapter, and next chapter we will study about the biodiversity and its conservation. Thank you for today.